Thanks for listening to the Herd Podcast. Be sure to catch us live every weekday from 12 to 3 Eastern, 9 to noon Pacific on Fox Sports Radio and FS1. Find your local station for the Herd at foxsportsradio.com or stream us live every day on the iHeartRadio app by searching Herd.
Now let's get this party started.
You're listening to Fox Sports Radio.
This is the Herd, wherever you may be and however you may be listening, live in Los Angeles, iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio, and FS1. Joy Taylor is joining me.
Morning, Colin.
On a Thursday. NFL starts tonight. Greg Cosell later on the show as we talk a lot of football today, but I think we have to and we should begin with a story that broke just before our show began yesterday, and my takeaway on Urban Meyer was, I think he needs to be suspended. I don't have all the information, but this morning I've got more information. And I am incredibly, greatly disappointed, not only in Ohio State football, but when I think of Ohio State football and Urban Meyer, I think of Louisville basketball and Rick Pitino, and Baylor football and Art Briles, and Penn State football at the end with Joe Pa. Those universities and those fan bases and those coaches want me to believe the unbelievable. That husbands and wives don't talk. That coaches who live together in small spaces for 70 hours a week vacation together don't talk. We now have texts which show that Urban Meyer's wife, also an Ohio State athletic department employee, knew of a coach on her husband's staff beating his wife. We know that to be true, and she never told him for 3 years. I sit with my wife, and I'm sure you do this, every night. When the kids go to bed last night, we talk for 90 minutes. We talk about our kids. We talk about our lives. We talk about our future. We talk about our house. We talk about vacation plans. We talk about schools. Urban Meyer's wife, 3 years ago, knew about this, validated, verified on texts. And for 3 years, never told her husband. Man, that must be a really bad marriage. Oh, wait, it's not. Because at Big Ten Media Day, Urban Meyer bragged about the relationship with his wife. Here it is.
She's always weighed in, and that's my best friend and soulmate, and she's been right there with everything, especially when you start dealing with, not necessarily who's going to carry the ball on third down. She has opinions too, but we don't chat about that. We chat about people.
People.
She's got a great spirit and a great love of people, and her heart's always in the right place. She's phenomenal.
Okay.
And so absolutely, I rely on her.
We talk about people. Well, is Courtney Smith a person? Because she was getting beaten by her husband, who was a football coach under Urban Meyer. Not to be hyperbolic here, but when you brag about your relationship and then you want me the next day to believe we didn't talk about it. Really? College football coaches and basketball coaches are men often in small towns with power, where pro fans are loyal to a point, college fans are loyal to a fault. Ohio State fans this morning will surround their coach because that's what they do in college towns. And you want me to believe that a coach who brags about his marriage, about how his wife is great, and they talk about people, didn't talk about the one person on his staff beating his wife. College football coaches have become Jack Nicholson. Remember his character in A Few Good Men? You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. It's a code. Us against them. The big bad media out to get us. Civilians, average people don't get us. Why don't football coaches and basketball coaches like Rick Pitino and Urban Meyer and Art Briles and the people at Penn State years ago stop being Jack Nicholson? Start nurturing, not protecting. Start communicating, not protecting. And fans, it's on you. You are asking me to believe the unbelievable. That for 3 years, the wife didn't talk to the coach. We have verification that multiple wives on the staff knew, and none of them talked to their husbands. And if they did, then the husbands who are coaches didn't talk to the boss down the hall, who they talked to 15 times a day, never brought it up once. I don't know if you fire Urban Meyer. Maybe you should fire all of Ohio State's football coaches for not coming up with better material. Come up with a better excuse. Here's Courtney Smith, who's been pleading for help for years.
You know, Shelly, she said she was going to have to tell Urban. She was going to have to tell Urban. I said, that's fine. You know, you should tell Urban. We can't have somebody like this coaching young men.
No, you can't. And you shouldn't. But increasingly, we see it over and over. I don't know what to do with coaches. I've told you. When it comes to small college town, and Columbus is not Mayberry, but fans are loyal to a fault. In pro towns where people are not all from the town, because big cities have lots of jobs and lots of people move there not from the city, fans are loyal to a point. Brian Colangelo, wife had a burner account, fans didn't buy it, team didn't buy it, owner didn't buy it, media didn't buy it, GM gone. Unfortunately, we have a victim here, and the town will put their arms around the coach yet again and ask me to believe the unbelievable. Let me shift to something with football that is a lighter note. Jared Cook's a good football player. He says that Jon Gruden, the new coach of the Raiders, is showing the Raiders old grainy film from 1976. I laughed at this because I don't know how this this Raiders Gruden thing's going to work. Baseball is considered old, stuck in its ways, rigid, and stodgy. But even 10 years ago in baseball, we didn't talk about launch angles and exit velocity. We didn't have defensive shifts. Starters were paid a lot more than bullpen guys. But baseball's stuck in its ways, right? Has made massive changes. 10-year contracts. Didn't have those 10 years ago. Bullpens now are more important than starters. That wasn't the case 10 years ago. A shortstop plays out in right field. That didn't happen 10 years ago. So baseball's stodgy, and 10 years ago it didn't look the same. What about football? The NFL is like Silicon Valley. They change week to week, day to day. Football doesn't even look the same on television that it did 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you had something called huddles and fullbacks, and the overtime rules were different, and the PAT rules were different, and you didn't have 4 and 5 receivers all the time. But that part, I think Jon Gruden can figure out. What worries me about Jon Gruden is the other stuff, not the schematics, not the rule changes. The world has changed in 10 years. 10 years ago, a coach, an old white male coach, could walk into a locker room that's diverse and say, no politics, and it was understood. If the old ball coach walks into an NFL locker room and says that today, he's racially insensitive. Or worse. There was no Twitter. There was no Instagram. There was no Snapchat. The players weren't as empowered. But players today, and rightfully so, have an opinion. Because we go to these games for the players, not the GM, scouts, and coaches. Jon Gruden will figure out all the football stuff. I don't think he'll figure it out immediately. He'll be a little rigid. It'll take a little while. It did for Joe Gibbs. But the world's changing now. And that's what worries me about the Khalil Mack situation. The best defensive player arguably in the NFL. And Jon Gruden hasn't talked to him since February. That's not a schematic thing. That's a personality thing. That's the way it used to be thing. It used to be the NFL was all about the coach. Not even Bill Belichick is calling all the shots in the NFL anymore. You want to call the shots, there's other places to do it. It's not the NFL. It's not the NBA. It's not Major League Baseball, where managers are increasingly replaceable. So I worry when I read this story, and I got to be honest, I laughed at the headline. Jared Cook says Jon Gruden is showing the Raiders, quote, old grainy film from like 1976. I just don't think this thing's going to work long term. It may work for a year. Derek Carr is an unbelievable quarterback. But I got to give my staff credit. They found something. I just can't figure out why Jon Gruden is not communicating and can't get a hold of Khalil Mack. But We found out why their communication is so bad. Gruden is using America Online. And he's trying to get a hold of Khalil Mack using this device. And Joy, it's just not working.
Someone keeps picking up the phone in his house. That's what it is. And then he has to keep starting over.
So he's trying to get a hold of Khalil Mack. And the connecting, it's not working. Yeah, it's just not working.
Maybe that's Khalil emailing him back.
In 2008, when Gruden left, here was a headline. On internet television, that's how it was termed, both NFL.com and NBCSports.com carried complete live games for the first time ever on that thing called the internet. That's the game he left. And football is fluid, man. There's jobs that don't change in 10 years. They're called the post office. NFL, jettison the thing for a decade. I don't care if you're talking about it on football. That locker room is a completely different place. Get an extra 5% off purchases every day at Lowe's. Items big or small. When you use the Lowe's Advantage card, all projects have a starting point. Start with Lowe's. See store for details. U.S. only. Bruce Feldman in 10 minutes. So this is an interesting story. There's a new book out. It was released yesterday called 12. That's Tom Brady's number. 12. The inside story of Tom Brady's fight for redemption. And it talks about Tom Brady's unhappiness and displeasure over Deflategate. And Robert Kraft in particular, siding with the NFL, not Tom Brady with Deflategate. Now, there's a quote in the book where Robert Kraft says, at no time should the agenda of one team outweigh the collective good of the full 32, meaning take care of the league before you take care of an individual. Apparently, Brady was watching that press conference and blew up, was furious, grabbed the phone, and called the executive director of the Players Association, A.Smith, and yelled, "What the blank? Why am I not getting the support I deserve on this thing?" Okay, time out. Tom, New England is a ruthless, cold business. Coaches and players are expendable. Yet the minute that ethos landed on Tom, he didn't like it. Tom, the reason you're Tom Brady isn't because of your mobility. You're the strongest guy with the best arm. It's because they've been cold and ruthless. And they get rid of coaches, and they get rid of players, and they don't lose a second of sleep over it. That's why you're Tom Brady. The only time, in fact, that Bob Kraft had a heart, that the New England Patriots weren't ruthless, is the biggest mistake they've ever made. They gave away Jimmy Garoppolo for a nickel and a ham sandwich to San Francisco. That is the one time they decided we should be nice to Tom. And Tom has been good to us. And we should support Tom. And so let's take our next quarterback for the next decade and let's give him to San Francisco for virtually nothing. A second-round pick, which has about a 65% chance of doing anything. Garoppolo has a 100% chance of winning games. He's 5-0 in his first 5. If you work for a ruthless organization, expect them to be ruthless. Walmart is legendary. They're ruthless. They go into a town and squish small-time businesses. Squish them. They negotiate for every penny on every deal with their retailers. I know I have 2 buddies who have had products and have had to negotiate with Walmart. You don't make any money. You don't make any money. They squeak, but they know you want your product in their store. You make no profit. Sometimes you lose money. They're ruthless. So if you work for Walmart, don't complain in negotiations. They don't pay you much because they're ruthless. That's what they do to small businesses. That's what they do to retailers. And that's what they do, frankly, to their bosses, their management, and their employees. They're ruthless. That defines what New England is. They're cold. They're covert. They're quiet. They're under the radar. They are system over player. And that's largely, and I love Brady, but he's not as talented as the Elways and Marinos. He doesn't throw the ball like Aaron Rodgers. Tom has benefited greatly from that bottom line business model. Don't complain if it occasionally lands on you. Here's Joy Taylor with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
All right, sticking with Tom Brady, apparently he is getting soft in his old age, Colin. Rob Gronkowski claims Brady has lightened up and he doesn't yell at him as much anymore. Let's take a listen.
I would say probably back in the day, he was a little bit more on you. If you didn't get it right, a little bit more in your face. But I mean, I don't see, he's 40, going on 41 now. I don't feel like he backed off on that a little bit, which is nice. He used to be mean to me. Glad he's not to these young guys. He loves the game of football so much. Usually on his birthday, he usually just wants a good practice day, a lot of touchdowns.
Well, I also think that Tom appreciates Gronk so much.
Oh, for sure.
And secondly, Gronk's a smarter football player than he was 10 years ago. So, the thing about Tom is, when you're as good as Tom is, he does that documentary. He tells everybody what he is and how committed he is. So when you join Tom Brady now, he doesn't have to teach you anything other than the plays. Everybody gets in line with Tom. If you're not committed like Tom, because now because of the Tom vs. Time documentary, he's uber competitive and uber committed. So, Gronk knows Brady and appreciates what he brings to the table. He's basically saying Tom's nicer, but the truth is the reason Tom's nicer is because Gronk is a better listener, more coachable.
And they're probably more on the same page than they were 10 years ago. He doesn't have to, grab him by his face mask and yell at him for running the wrong route. But he did say he's nicer to the young guys, too. So maybe Gronk's a little upset about that.
I think
the younger guys didn't get it as rough as Gronk did.
I think young guys walk into the room now and
a little more afraid.
Well, Tom's brand's been established. Like Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant's first 8-9 years in the league, people didn't know how to react to him. Then when the stories come out about how Kobe is, you walk into the Lakers and Kobe is going to crush you at practice. So once you have this defining, advertised, written about, talked about, discussed brand, players know what they're getting when they enter the building, and I think that makes it easier for you as the star.
So a big story that we were watching this NFL season is Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs traded their Pro Bowl quarterback to the Redskins early in the year and went all in on the 22-year-old as the future of the franchise. But through 6 days of camp, Mahomes has thrown 7 picks.
Yeah.
So let's take a listen to his reaction.
Yeah, I mean, that was on me. I easily could have ran it in. We were in a live period, and I kind of didn't want to hear the defense talking trash to me for running in, and because they can't tackle me. And so I threw the ball, but, I mean, you just got to play your game. Play the game how it's supposed to be played. Don't try to force something in because they can't tackle you. And it's just something I just have to learn from, and hopefully in the game I just run it in pretty easy.
I got to tell you, I don't really want to overreact to this. This is what training camp is for. Get these bugs and these indecisions out before the season starts. So I realize it's a lot, and we're watching all of these guys under such a microscope that every mistake they make feels like a bigger deal. But it's training camp. I'd rather have him make these mistakes here.
The only team in the league that I love the coach, Andy Reid, and I love the roster I do with the Chiefs, but I don't know what to make of them is Kansas City. To me, Kansas City's the one team in the league I have no idea. Because I love their coach and their roster. And in any other instance, I'd be playoff team. I have no idea. I didn't see this kid play enough in college.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him play in the NFL. They, to me, are the mystery team in the league. If they go 11-5, you'd be like, well, of course, they've got great players and a great coach. But they could go 5-11 because this kid's a turnover machine. To me, the Chiefs are the enigma in the league. I predicted 9-7 because that was the safest prediction I could make. I figured Andy Reid's so good and the roster's so good, they'll have a winning record. I have never seen Patrick. He doesn't. The bullets are flying when the game. I don't even want to watch him in the preseason because the preseason's vanilla defense.
Right.
So he could. Tim Tebow had a great game for the Eagles in preseason. They cut him the next week. I want to see this kid October 3rd on the road against the Chargers. Then I'll make my decision on Kansas City.
Yeah, their roster and coach are so good that you feel like you should feel better about them.
Right.
But you have absolutely no idea what he's going to be. So
nothing.
It really all comes down to Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
Finally, we talked about this yesterday, the fight between Draymond Green and Tristan Thompson. I say that loosely because it was more like just shoving. But Draymond said he couldn't stay silent any longer. He took to Instagram on Wednesday to respond to the rumors that he and Tristan Thompson fought at LeBron's post-SB party last month. He posted, I enjoyed y'all's stories and talk shows over the last couple days. Thanks for watching, Draymond. We appreciate it. Them joints inaccurate, though, G. All right, carry on, my good people. They might want to cancel that parade, too, LOL. And then he posted another story after he had thought about it and said, nah, keep the parade. That city won't have any for a while. I forgot Braun left. And that's followed by 6 emojis of the guy shrugging with his hands in the air. It's actually kind of a funny response.
I'm still deeply bothered that they were invited to LeBron's party and got into a fight.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous anyway. Like, they didn't even get into a fight. It's just, they just carried on what they were doing on the court, which is a bunch of short pushes and forehead shoving. Like, they didn't even actually fight.
You invite me to a party at your grotto tomorrow, and I come and get into a fight with one of the people at your party.
I'd be very impressed. I gotta tell you, Colin. I'd be like, what did you do to Colin Cowherd to get him to fight? I've got to hear what you said to him. But I understand the point of what you're saying. It's really inappropriate. But what bothers me is if you're going to bother to get into a fight at LeBron's SB party to carry on or figure out whatever happened in the finals, please actually fight. They just did a bunch of shoving and then went back to their tables.
Yeah, I mean, at least throw a haymaker or something.
Like you're not going to get punched in the face and stay at the party.
Joey with the news.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Lie News.
After Notre Dame, Ohio State football is probably the biggest name in college football in a small group of others. After Nick Saban, Urban Meyer is probably the most highly regarded coach. Will he be the coach by game one? We bring in a top college football guy, somebody we trust, always have, worked with him before, longtime Bruce Feldman now joining us in the Herd. We led our show yesterday with this. There's still fallout. Now, there's an investigation going on. The current situation with him does not sound great. Generally, when these coaches, they have an investigation and they are paid leave, it doesn't end up well. The cynical part of me says they're already working on a buyout.
You know, I think you wonder about how long this kind of happens, where the more time unfolds, the more it's hard to undo kind of the PR side of it, where you feel like people are saying he's got to be out of there. It's like everything becomes crystallized. Now, I don't know if it's going that direction, but you know, yesterday morning around this time, I was like, oh, there's probably a 25% chance he may not survive this at Ohio State. By the time I left here yesterday afternoon, I thought it was around 50-50. And this morning, I think it's even further, maybe, a 75% chance. But the one thing that I am most curious about, and, we can talk about Shelley Meyer's text and the text of the wife of the
Shelley Meyer is Urban's wife, who also works in the football or in the athletic department.
Well, she is a nurse and she has a role at the university.
Yeah.
But the question I have is, so when Urban Meyer spoke, and we played this clip yesterday morning from 2 weeks ago at Big Ten Media Days, when he was pressed on this issue, more about what he knew when, he talked about how in 2009, when they were both at Florida, he and the assistant coach, S.A.S, that he had reported it to his boss, which was basically what you're supposed to do as it relates to the Title IX cases, the Clery Act, what coaches are supposed to do. Whether you believe it or not, whether you think it's you're not judge and jury in this case.
But you have to report it to your AD.
Yes, and go up to the Title IX office, let them deal with it. So he did that in 2009. And everyone is assuming that from the Shelley Meyer text that she had with Zach Smith's ex-wife, that he did know, contrary to what he said 2 weeks ago at Big Ten Media Days, where there was nothing to it, and he kind of was like, where does this story come from? I was only texted about it the night before. What if he did actually communicate to his AD or to the Title IX office and say, hey, there's some allegations about Zach Smith here, just want to let you know. Then what? Now, did they say, well, there's no charges that were the police found there, and then they just kind of just washed their hands of it? I don't know. But I think if he did that part of it, then that kind of changes where we're at with this. But we don't know that at this point. It's surprising to me that he would have gone to his boss at Florida in 2009 and not done it in 2015. And keep in mind, what happened in that 6-year gap was the Jerry Sandusky scandal at Penn State.
This is a big deal. So in 2011, you have the Penn State scandal. So coaches are now hyper aware of reporting things. So in 2009, Urban reports it, but he wouldn't report it if he knew in 2015?
That's the part that seems a little odd. But then you go back to his answer from Big Ten Media Days 2 weeks ago and how he handled it. Now, again, and I've talked about this a few times now, he really speaks in absolutes. This is nothing, this is that. Was he saying this is nothing and meant, well, because there was no charges filed and it was very dismissive? I don't know. I mean, we haven't heard from Urban Meyer to explain that part of it since all this stuff has come out. But if there's some kind of documentation that either there were meetings or discussions had, then this might change the dynamic.
Listen, in the Joe Pa situation, in the Art Briles situation, in the Rick Pitino situation, and now in the Ohio State situation, in all four, there's one common thread. Fans want me to believe of those institutions that nobody talks. Husbands and wives don't talk. Coaches don't talk. I can't believe that. You cannot tell me, do we have official validation that Urban's wife knew about the beating? We do.
We do from the text messages.
So then she would have obviously, over 3 years, had a discussion with her head coach, right? Is Urban denying that?
Well, we don't know, but the interesting part, again, go back to what he said 2 weeks ago. When he's talking about Florida, he's talking about, he was the one who brought up he and Shelley had communication with the couple. It's a young couple. It's a family they knew.
Yes.
So you're going to say that they talked to them, perhaps they talked to them about counseling, and then all of a sudden Shelley Meyer is going to have conversations with the wife, with the ex-wife, and talk about, at one point there's a line from Shelley Meyer in those texts, he scares me.
Right.
So she would know all that and yet not tell her husband when they've already had some of those preliminary discussions?
So, yeah, years later, we have validation that Urban's wife is again in the middle of this situation, and she didn't tell Urban. Again, Urban went on Big Ten Media Days and told us, not my opinion, told us how great his wife was, the relationship. They talk about not games, but people. I just find Rick Pitino. I find the Joe Pa situation. I find Art Briles. I like Urban, but I find Urban here. You're asking me to believe the unbelievable. This is not an alibi like Bob robbed a bank. Oh, no, he didn't. We have a receipt and a picture he was on vacation with his family. You're asking me to believe that husbands and wives don't talk, that coaches don't talk down the hallway. I just can't believe that stuff. I said this yesterday sometimes, that college coaches, unlike pro coaches, are salesmen. They're recruiters. The lifeblood of all college sports. John Calipari's not the world's best coach. He may be the world's best recruiter. Okay, Nick Saban has acknowledged, I may not be the best coach. I'm the best recruiter. Pete Carroll recruiting. A lot of these college coaches are great salesmen, and their fan bases buy them. They're messiahs. And do you think in Ohio State today, in Columbus, is there full support for Urban?
No, I think there's some skepticism at this point because people see this is an issue that I think is very different. Even though when it was in 2009, what we as a society, what we on social media think is tolerable, the issue of domestic violence.
No.
I think there are some people who are really disappointed. I think there are some people who are probably, you know what, they got a wait and see approach. But a lot of it is looking at it going, this doesn't add up with the guy who we've heard talk about these issues. Again, this isn't Bobby Petrino, by the way, who never professed to be any great human being or any great molder of men or anything like that.
Urban does.
Urban does, and he's talked about zero tolerance issues with domestic violence and violence against women. He's also, one of his big tenements, or one of his big points is honesty. And so you're just saying there's a disconnect here, or is it lip service? What do we make of this?
Okay, the football coach who has been since fired now is A.smith, again, with Urban in 2009 Florida, with Urban Ohio State, now been fired. He is related to a legendary Ohio State coach, Earl Bruce. Earl Bruce and Urban are tight. Yeah. Now, that leads me to believe, guessing, don't have facts, that he hired him to begin with as a friend to his mentor.
Absolutely. So Earl Bruce, who just passed away recently, was ill for a long time. In fact, a year and a half ago, I was at an Ohio State practice in the spring, and Earl Bruce was there. He was being driven around in a golf cart. I mean, he's been in poor health for a while, but that is one of Urban Meyer's biggest mentors. He gave Urban Meyer a job in the late 80s on his staff. Zach Smith was a walk-on player for Urban when Urban was the first time he was a head coach, which was at Bowling Green, and he had taken him along. And, you start talking to people who've been around Zach Smith as coaches, and did they know he was a domestic abuser? That part is a little more murky. But you start hearing details about him being late for his own meetings. Some of just character issues were all over the place. And so you're sitting there going, take a step back from this. Urban Meyer's career right now is obviously in serious peril at this point. And this is a guy who talked even in the Big Ten media days, E plus R equals O, and all these leadership things. And yet his career is hanging by the balance because
he supports a wide receiver coach who, by any standard, is not respected in the industry.
No, and it's kind of been a screw up. And so you're kind of tied to somebody like this, and they can potentially take you down. And out of the loyalty of, again, this was his mentor's grandson. He goes way back with this assistant coach. He gave him a chance at Florida. And you're just kind of scratching your head saying, man, I wonder how much he regrets he didn't cut bait sooner with this guy. Never mind. It wasn't like this was about winning games. I think he has a better receiver coach right now in Brian Hartline, who spent 7 years in the NFL and was on his staff.
Good Lord.
But this wasn't about winning games. This was out of a loyalty. You can say it's blind loyalty, but at what point did you say, man, this is a mistake?
Urban just signed an extension, $8.5 million a year. Again, the cynic part of me thinks right now his leave of absence, they're negotiating an out. Does he keep his job? How does he keep his job?
I think the biggest opportunity for them to keep Urban Meyer is if there is some documentation or some proof that Urban Meyer ran it up to his superiors or to the Title IX office in 2015.
Yeah, because then if that's the case, his only lie is to us, the media. But he didn't lie to his bosses, and he could keep his job.
Yes, and you won't get fired for that. You can get fired, as we found out with Jim Tressel, for lying to the NCAA.
Or your bosses.
Yeah, or your bosses.
Right.
But when it comes to lying to the media, there can be definitely workarounds on that. There's going to be a lot of damage control that would have to happen.
No question. That's a very good point, Bruce. You're not going to lose your job lying to me, but you're going to lose your job, first of all, lying to the NCAA, you're done, and your career's over. Lying to your bosses, you'll lose it. That's a really big point. If the lie is only, I just learned about it yesterday, but he had told his bosses 3 years ago, I think he keeps it.
Yeah, I think he would too, because then there's some cover under the Title IX issue, which again, some of these things I think potentially could be out of Ohio State's hands if they cannot document it.
Yeah, we got Title IX.
We have the Clery Act, and that ties into federal funds, what schools get if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Again, I go back to that 2009. Why would he have done it then if he knew in 2015 and not done it at that point?
Bruce Feldman, thank you so much. Excellent work on this story that continues to be incredibly fluid. It is the biggest story right now in sports, in my opinion. Tonight we have an NFL game. You must watch this game. And I don't say that about preseason games. I'll tell you why coming up next in the Herd. So I am not a big believer in any of this preseason stuff, Joey Taylor. Preseason football, after week 3 is the only week that, starters play a significant amount. But I do think tonight is going to be the beginning of a controversial Tim Tebow Denver-like season. I have predicted this since Lamar Jackson got drafted. I said he's a project more than a prospect. He should sit the first year. But he's a gifted athlete, and he's going to get drafted a little overdrafted somewhere first, second round, and the fans are going to go crazy and want him to play. So tonight, here's what we know about the NFL preseason. Defenses are vanilla. No defensive coordinator shows anything. So the second thing we know is by the time Lamar Jackson gets into the game, he's going to be playing against guys who are going to be working at supermarkets in 4 months or 4 weeks. So he's going to be the best athlete on the field in regular games. Now it won't be close. So he's going to excel. TJ Hushmanzada was on our show yesterday and talked about this. Lamar Jackson's going to have a nice camp. Here we go.
You have to be basic because the guys that are going in, you try to get too fancy, somebody's going to blow an assignment. So you're going to play a 1 high shell that's cover 3 or cover 1. You're going to play a 2 high shell, whether it's cover 4, cover 2, cover 6. So it's going to be things he's seen in college already. He's not going to have to think about it. He'll probably go a drive into the third quarter, Flacco, the third preseason game with the starters. And so, once again, Lamar's going to look like a superstar in the preseason. I foresee him playing extremely well in the preseason.
Okay, so that's great, right? But first of all, Tim Tebow looked great with Philadelphia in a preseason game. He went like 11 for 17, 2 touchdowns, 117 quarterback rating, got cut the next week. Kellen Moore last year in this Hall of Fame game looked great. Now he's a Cowboys quarterback coach. So a lot of people are going to look good in the preseason. But here's the issue. 5 teams drafted a quarterback in the first round. 4 of the 5, Jets, Bills, Cardinals, Cleveland, know the guy they drafted is the future and is probably the future at some point this year. There's nothing on top of them. Like Tyrod Taylor is not the future and everybody knows it. And Teddy Bridgewater and Josh McCown aren't the future and everybody knows it. And Sam Darnold's there for a year in Arizona is not the future and everybody knows it. And A.J. McCarron's not the future in Buffalo. But that's where Baltimore's different. Baltimore has a quarterback who last year was 9-7 and who won a Super Bowl and was the MVP of the Super Bowl, and who, by the way, is 10-5 in 15 playoff games, including beating people like Tom Brady. And so when Lamar Jackson of those 5 first-round quarterbacks comes into the preseason game tonight and flourishes, people are going to go, yeah! But in Baltimore, there's a but. Winning record, Super Bowl MVP, paid a lot, franchise guy, been great in the playoffs. There is somebody above him that could very well be here in 4 years. What does that translate to? A quarterback controversy. We saw this in Denver, where Tim Tebow was not ready to play his first year, but because he was drafted in the first round and was profoundly popular in college, and the media was looking for something different, and Denver has a history of winning, and Denver had won Super Bowls, and the quarterback was good, Kyle Orton, but not great, no was efficient, Tebow becomes very attractive. Now we have Baltimore, like Denver. They've won Super Bowls. The quarterback's good, but in recent years hasn't been effective. It's a culture used to winning. The quarterback gets, in my opinion, overdrafted. And he, like Tebow, is going to look good in that preseason. And all of a sudden, you're going to have a fireworks show. You are going to have a fireworks show. So I think it's going to be fascinating. I think Lamar's going to look good tonight. And I think, Flacco, they say, is having a great camp. The word on Flacco has always been he works hard when he has to.
Right. It's not surprising that he's having the best camp of his career.
Yeah, that's
all of the sudden.
Yeah, Matt Ryan works hard all the time. Russell Wilson, hard all the time. Brady, hard all the time. Flacco's reputation in this league, he has his best years and games when he has to. That's why he's great in the playoffs, 10-15, and can be awful in preseason games.
Well, maybe he just gets complacent. He works better under pressure.
So I think tonight's going to be absolutely fascinating. I think Lamar is going to be fun to watch. And I think we're going to have our second Tim Tebow story. Now, by the way, I think Lamar is a better pro prospect than Tim Tebow. I never bought Tebow as a franchise guy. I think Lamar, 2 years in a system, may become one. I'm not saying he is. I don't think he's Darnold. I don't think he throws the ball as accurately as Baker, but I never thought Tebow ever was a franchise guy, which is, I rolled my eyes the whole time at Tebow. Lamar's a project, but he's a guy that you put in this league for 2 years behind Flacco, and in year 3, you get the right pieces around him, good offensive line, you do a little bit of that read stuff. Yeah, I think it could work.
Yeah, well, where I don't agree with you on Baker and Josh Rosen and, I don't know, who knows what's going on with Josh Allen, but where I don't agree with you with those two, I believe that they should just start.
Yeah.
I do agree with you in the situation with Lamar Jackson, but he kind of reminds me of a Tebow. I'm with you on the Tebow because of the popularity in college.
And he runs a little bit.
But he also reminds me of Cordell Stewart. He has that kind of athletic, running ability.
Yes.
And, you needed a couple years to develop into a starting quarterback.
Right.
So in this situation, this is a proper situation where you would want him to develop.
Yes.
But because he's so popular, you're going to have fans and media calling for him.
Yes, that's right. So now, again, the only way Lamar is not a controversy is if Flacco comes out and they start 6-1, they look great, and Flacco looks great, and then you're going to be, okay. Maybe that could happen. But remember, with Flacco, his quarterback passer rating since 2012, I think it's like 35th in the league. It's behind Blake Bortles. Now, the other thing that I do worry of, the reason I can't totally put my arms around Lamar Jackson is he had a great college offensive coach, Bobby Petrino. As good an offensive coach as college football has. And he still completed less than 60% of his throws. Bobby Petrino is not your typical college coach. Bobby Petrino could coach in the NFL today. He'd be better than a third of the coaches, maybe half. He wouldn't be Belichick, Sean Payton, but he would be better than half. He's not Andy Reid, not Pete Carroll, but he's good. And he was under 60%. That line in college to pro, if you don't complete 60% in college, very hard to excel in the pros. We'll watch it all tonight unfold. Lamar and the Ravens are really, really captivating. Greg Cosell, Rashad Jennings around the corner.
Want more Herd? The Herd streams 24 hours a day, 7 days a week within the iHeartRadio app. Search Herd to listen live or on demand whenever you like.
This is The Herd, wherever you may be and however you may be listening, live in Los Angeles, iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio, FS1. Joy Taylor is joining me for hour number 2 today. Greg Cosell in 1 hour from now. You're going to get smarter with football. Rashad Jennings, former New York Giants, got a new New York Times bestseller book coming out. Very exciting. You know, Joy, that I like Dak Prescott.
Yes.
I don't think he has the best arm. I don't think he's the most talented quarterback. But he has a personality and qualities that I like. And those qualities are things, when I read business books, they talk about leaders having. Smart, but not a show-off. Confident, but not cocky. Formidable, a calming influence when chaos is around you. Since he's come to the NFL, he's had Jerry Jones being controversial, and his star running back being controversial, and the Cowboys themselves are being controversial. And this week he talked about the anthem and it was controversial. And once again, none of it sticks to him because he's Dak Prescott. And what I always loved about him is what I love about all young quarterbacks. Who are the young quarterbacks that I like? Andrew Luck, Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, Carson Wentz, Jared Goff. Calm. Noise around him, calm. Who are the quarterbacks I've been critical of? Cam Newton, Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield, Jameis Winston. High, low, happy, angry, moody, inconsistent, accurate, inaccurate. Because when I read business books, they say leadership comes from certain key personality traits. When the world's on fire, are you gasoline like Cam Newton and Baker Mayfield and Johnny Manziel and Jameis Winston? Or are you a hose that puts it out like Russell Wilson? Look at Russell Wilson in Seattle. Richard Sherman saying this, they're getting political. Pete Carroll this. Rock solid. Who is the rock solid face of Seattle? Don't hear him much in the media. Russell Wilson. So Dak Prescott a couple of days ago did something that was hard to do. It is very easy to go on social media, Instagram and Twitter, and say, everybody should kneel, players' rights, social justice. Dak did the opposite. He said, well, football's my job, and I think there's a time and a place to protest. I don't think it's the games. Leadership isn't doing the easy thing. It's doing what you believe is the right thing and sticking to it and not bailing on your opinion. And Dak Prescott was pushed back. And you know what Dak Prescott said? Quote, go on social media and see it. Doesn't bother me. I said what I said. I've got an opinion. So does everybody else. I accept yours. You accept mine. It's not about his arm. It's not about his size. It's about his leadership qualities. The Cowboys are a zoo. Des Bryant, Tony Romo. He walked into this league with a Tony Romo controversy, then a Zeke controversy, then a Des controversy, then Jason Witten retires, and his owner can't stop talking about the anthem. Dak Prescott is the calming influence to a noisy environment. And it's why I think for the next 12 years, they have got their franchise quarterback. Not as talented as Aikman, but not as erratic as Tony Romo. A rock-solid guy. Leadership wins games, not your arms or your legs. It's leadership, practice, standing by what you believe. And with that, we bring in former NFL running back, New York Times bestseller, Rashad Jennings. Jags, Raiders, Giants. Guys on Dancing with the Stars, guys writing books. By the way, you were one of the first people that saw Dak Prescott.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you remember the game and what struck you?
You know what? Coming out, playing against the Cowboys, this was his rookie year.
Yeah.
First start, fresh off the boat.
That's right. There was Giants-Cowboys opening game.
Watching him was interesting. I remember coming back to a sideline after we have gone on offense, we've done our series, come back to the sideline. They go out offense, third down. You know how you start to get ready to go back. First down. It's like, okay, all right. Another first down. On third down, we're like, man, this is a rookie. We waiting for him to stumble. Second quarter, still doesn't stumble. Third quarter, doesn't stumble. I hit one of my teammates. I said, hey, this is not a regular rookie. We knew from day one he was going to be different. We knew day one he was going to have all the talent to go a long distance. So, I mean, he obviously has help. He had help. One of the best offensive line there.
That helps.
That helps, have a consistent safety net.
But, Rashad, everybody's had help.
But he's special.
Okay, Joe Montana had Bill Walsh.
You got to have it.
Nobody wins without help in this league. I like Dak. By the way, I saw Kevin Sumlin's a football coach, now at Arizona, used to be at Texas A&M. I saw him last week. He passed on Dak.
Yeah.
And he said, that's the biggest mistake I've ever made. I said, why? He goes, he's so smart. And I kept saying, what about him do you like? And he kept going, he's so smart. And when I watch Dak's leadership, this is the latest example. By the way, that Twitter thing, that's not easy, by the way.
It's not.
He took a stance that 90% of people on Twitter, at least, are going to disagree with.
Yeah, he's going to get hatred right away. I mean, anytime you're standing against what the wave is doing, you're going against the current. It's going to be difficult. People going to have opinions, but it's funny because we always say respect people's opinions. But if it's not like yours, then I'm not going to respect it. It's a very unorthodox deal. But I mean, I'm proud of him because he believes what he believes and he stood for it. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, so I'm not a big preseason guy. Don't take much from it. But tonight, Lamar Jackson's going to come out, and people are getting tired of Joe Flacco. And Joe Flacco's passer rating since he won the Super Bowl has been below average. And Baltimore's a city, they win Super Bowls. That's a great organization.
Yeah,
and they have high standards. This isn't Cleveland. They got high standards. What do you think? I mean,
I'm not going to give a knock on Cleveland, but.
No, it's not. But I mean, Baltimore's a different standard. What do you think Lamar looks like tonight? What do you think we see this year with Lamar Jackson?
Lamar's going to come in. I think he has all of the tangibilities to be a great quarterback in the NFL. Now, I don't know how well he could pick up the playbook. He was always able in the collegiate level to compensate maybe a lack of something breaking down, or for us, he didn't know what he was doing and he could take off running. I don't know if he's going to be able to take off running as much in the NFL, but he can move. He's wiggle. His wiggle is there.
Yeah.
He can dink and dunk the ball down the field, but I don't know if he has the long ball or not. That's going to be something fun to watch. Obviously, Joe Flacco, and I played with him in college, man. He's just a hard-working guy. He's going to be consistent and show up every day. But Lamar, he seems like a competitor. And starting off right now to get an opportunity to play in the NFL, put his best foot forward, it's going to be special to see.
Flacco, even when he's successful, the game is not dynamic. He's not an exciting player. Lamar, even when he struggles, it's going to be so dynamic. It's going to be hard for a fan to watch Lamar tonight run around. He could run around for 4 yards, but it's going to be so exciting.
It's going to be exciting
compared to sort of the dull presentation of Flacco, who is a drop back, doesn't run, throws strikes, and so I think it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. Now, it's interesting. You have a book out called The If in Life. And you're working on 4 other books. This was a New York Times bestseller. Your road to football is kind of a fascinating road. First of all, tell me about why your road you believe was different.
For so many reasons, my road to the NFL has been vastly different. I tell people a lot. I was a short, overweight, chubby kid, glasses, asthma. I had a 0.6 GPA at one point in time. Yeah. Struggled big time with asthma.
Because your dad was a smoker.
Yes, my dad smoked heavily. We didn't have the best relationship. And one time I was hospitalized, 13 years old. I'm in a hospital. I'm blowing through a peak flow, and it goes a centimeter. And I'm fighting for my life, much less what I would accomplish in life. The doctors told my dad, said, sir, you can't smoke around your son anymore. We got out of the hospital. My mom would call certain restaurants, checking the ventilation before we went. I was that bad off. When I got back home, my dad started smoking outside, right? A week goes by. He starts trickling back in the house for smoking. I'm in my room. Smoke seems through the vents. I smell it. I start choking up. Put a pillow over my face. I go upstairs and knock on my dad's door. He's in the corner drinking and smoking like he always does. I said, hey, Dad, can you stop drinking and smoking to be there for me? He took a puff of his smoke, sip of his drink. He looked at me and said, Rashad, what you want to do when you get older? Now, mind you, this is the first time he ever asked me that. Me and him don't have the best relationship. So part of me is excited I get to say it, but I can see he's just saying it because he doesn't care. I take my chance and I say, Dad, I want to play running back in the NFL. Overweight kid, glasses. This is just a child's dream. He took a puff of his smoke, sip of his drink, and he said, Rashad, you think you'd be able to make it to the NFL without smoking and drinking yourself? And with tears in my eyes, I looked at him. I said, just to prove you wrong, I'm never going to do it. And I'm 33, never drank alcohol a day in my life. I never smoked a day in my life, literally just to prove him wrong. And what's special about it in doing that, he watched his little knucklehead kid prove him wrong. He quit smoking and drinking himself, and we both feel like we saved each other's life in that one little instance.
God, that's incredible.
But if I wouldn't have took that as a challenge, if I would have had more hatred, if I would have used that for excuses, I wouldn't be here having this conversation. So through the book, The If in Life is a play on words. When you spell out life, if is in the middle.
Yeah.
And I go through 15 chapters of talking about different if moments in my life.
You had a Dancing with the Stars thing, right?
Yeah.
I almost wonder, do people know you from that or football?
The truth be told, probably more so dancing.
I bet they do.
Listen, I never forget, I came out of a sushi restaurant. I'm a big sushi fan. Love sushi. And it was a couple. This was a man and a woman, and they both recognized me at the same time, right? And I could see him say, hey, babe, that's Rashad Jennings. And she said, yeah, that's Rashad. Now, he was shocked. He was like, wait, how do you know him? And she looked at him and said, oh, yeah, that's the dancer. He didn't watch Dance with Stars. He said, no, baby, he played running back. He said, oh, you cute. You think he's a dancer. He played football. And I'm watching them argue. So I walk over. I was like, listen, both of y'all are actually right. And they neither side knew me from the other. So it's amazing how much this opportunity of dancing has opened up so many doors. I'm actually opening a ballroom studio back in my hometown. My university is going to name a department of dance after me. And I'm continuing to dance now. I'm about to post some stuff on Instagram in the next day or so. So I love dance. I wish I was introduced to it at an earlier age in my life.
God, you're so likable. Your story's amazing.
Appreciate
By the way,
it.
I don't have any rhythm. And so Joy.
Sure you do, man.
No, but I can see. I don't. I start. It doesn't quite.
Are you doing a twist?
Yeah, I need some social lubricant. I need I need a couple Heinekens, and then all of a sudden there's a lubrication in my hips.
Listen, man, we'll cut on some music, man. I'll show you some steps. one day.
Please do that. We got some time in the break here.
There we go. We could do that.
When you look at football now, and there's a lot of social stuff that's happening. I like the fact that you are okay with Dak, although you don't have to agree. Like, that's my takeaway. What's happened in America is if you don't agree with me, you're an idiot. And you're saying, I don't have to agree with Dak. Do you think it's harder in locker rooms? At the end of your career, the culture was changing in America, social media.
Yeah.
Do you think it's harder to coach today? Did you notice the change in the locker room, player empowerment?
I mean, yes, you do. Yes and no. I would say yes just simply because social media reaches people instantly. Yeah, hensing Instagram. But yes, whatever message you want to get across to somebody, you can get across right now. We all are reporters at this point in time. It doesn't have to be filtered to get through a source of approval before it's posted. And everybody believes what's posted is true. And they run off of that, right? Everybody has an opinion, wants to be heard. And oftentimes, fallacies are more so followed, right, than truth. And then you argue. It's subjective. It's all these things. So people are more so looking for argumentative posts and ways to hate people really fast rather than getting to the authenticity of the truth. So I believe social media is just simply a tool. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. And what we do with it is up to us. We can use social media to bring people together. We can use it for hatred. We can use it for division and separate. The choice is ours, but social media is a beautiful thing depending on how you use it.
His book is called The If in Life, How to Get Off Life's Sidelines and Become Your Best Self. You are aspirational and inspirational at the same time. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Rashad Jennings, New York Times best-selling book. I don't even say running back anymore. Running back. Running back. New York Times best-selling author and dance studio entrepreneur.
There we go.
Very soon.
Sunday on Fox is episodes 3 and 4 of the exclusive documentary about Baker Mayfield, where he appears right here on The Herd to confront Colin. Follow the NFL's #1 draft pick as he navigates his way through the complex world of professional football, all the way up Baker Mayfield Sunday at 3 Eastern on Fox, or stream it on the Fox Sports app.
It's really fun to watch. It's really fun to watch. I'm not a big fan of rookie quarterbacks having documentaries and brands, but it's very interesting to watch. Car shopping can be confusing. A lot of terms, dealer price, list price, invoice. Just go to TrueCar.com, save $3,000 of MSRP. Buy, seller, holds coming up in about 5 minutes. I'm not a big fan of making excuses. Okay? If you stink, own it. I don't want pointing fingers. I'm not a big believer in finger pointing. Now, I'm not saying there's not victims in life. There's a lot of victims in life. But what I see too often now, point, you, fault, me. You're 45 years old and you can't get your act together. It's not your mom and dad's fault. Look in the mirror. Okay, stop blaming people. So Cam Newton gets the most support in the world. Every time Cam Newton struggles, oh, he doesn't have this, doesn't have that, doesn't have this. Yesterday, an offensive lineman was retired from the Colts. He was drafted in the 2014 draft. He retired. Now, if you go look, because of that retirement, Andrew Luck gets drafted. Here is the first 2 draft classes the Colts drafted to support Andrew Luck. They're out of the NFL. Not a single player remains on the Colts roster. Almost all of them are out of the league. So the first 2 we know Indianapolis was bad. That's why they had the #1 pick and drafted him. It's always imperative that the first 2 draft classes after a quarterback is drafted are strong classes. They were disasters. 70% of the guys are already out of the league by 2018. 1 never played a game. Literally never played a game. 1 now retired. Let's go to Cam Newton. He was drafted. Cam Newton's first 2 draft classes. Luke Kuechly, Josh Norman, a starting right tackle, 2 defensive tackles, 1 a Pro Bowler. Kenyon Barner, who left, is back. A.J. Klein, great, left in New Orleans. I don't want to hear about Cam Newton having no support. He's got a high-functioning front office that in the first 2 drafts after Cam Newton arrived, they got a Hall of Fame linebacker, Luke Kuechly. He'll be a Hall of Famer. Josh Norman will be up for debate for the Hall of Fame. 2 defensive tackles, 1's a Pro Bowler. Multiple starters on both sides of the football. I don't want to hear any more excuses. I don't want to hear any. Andrew Luck won 33 games in his first 3 years. And these are the first 2 draft classes after he was picked. Absolute, utter garbage. After a retired player yesterday, nobody is still on the roster. 7 are out of the league. 1 never played. And 1 played 1 game in Indianapolis. And he still wins games. I don't want to hear about excuses. Joy with the news.
No.
Turn on the news. This is the Herdline News.
So the Steelers are heading into the 2018 NFL season on a mission. Mike Tomlin and company are trying to make up for falling short last season, and Ben's even changing his diet. And Tomlin praised Roethlisberger's off-season effort. Take a listen.
I think that's reasonable, regardless of position, man. We always say physical conditioning precedes anything else. So when a guy shows up in great shape, that's oftentimes the springboard for big-time play.
And you and I have discussed the Steelers a lot, and I feel like this is the year for the Steelers. Not that I'm doubting them, but I just feel like moving forward, like this is the year that you got to do it. You have all the pieces. Ben came into camp in shape. He's checking his diet. You still have Le'Veon Bell.
Why is Big Ben now on a diet? What would have inspired him?
I don't know. Maybe probably Tom Brady having 5 rings and.
Have you noticed what has
happened? Of all time?
What's happened since Tom versus Time, the documentary, came out? Have you noticed Aaron Rodgers now is talking about diet, and Big Ben has gone on a diet, and Joe Flacco? Have you noticed the power and the reverential respect for Brady? Brady comes out with a documentary. It is literally fundamentally changing how veteran quarterbacks eat.
A lot of avocado ice cream getting sold now.
Yep.
Kevin Durant isn't backing down off of Twitter despite the public criticism that he's getting for his social media activity. On First Things First, Chris Broussard dropped this little tidbit.
Durant texted me and said, the guy you see now is the real me. The guy in Oklahoma City was the phony. I was just trying to please everybody and do, what I thought everybody wanted me to do. The guy I am now in Golden State, that's the real me.
So that video spawned a response on Twitter from a user that called Durant a clown that no one respects. And Katie replied in a mocking fashion saying, here's that clout you ordered. Enjoy. I actually do believe him. I do believe that this is the real KD. That when he was in OKC, it was kind of, he wasn't getting the criticism that LeBron was getting. He didn't have quite the same expectations, but was still widely considered the second best player in the league. And we all know that he doesn't like strong criticism. They had to change the headline in the newspaper and such. But I do think that this is really who he is.
Yeah. I think he was kind of soft in Oklahoma City, and I think he's kind of soft now, and I was okay with both of them. I've never thought he's LeBron. I've never thought he's a killer like Kobe or Michael. This idea that, so what I'm supposed to, that's like me saying, the real me is the Fox Sports 1 me. The 10 years at ESPN, that was the phony me. No, they were both me, but you grow, and you learn stuff, and you make mistakes. I just think Kevin Durant's aged, and now he has different sensibilities and he has more self-awareness on what he is. He has more freedom now because he's won rings.
Right, he's validated.
He's been validated, but I don't buy that for 7-8 years he was just this big phony in the middle of the country pretending to be a bunch of stuff.
No, I don't think he's saying he's a phony. I just think he felt like he couldn't really be himself all the way, and he kind of held back is more along the lines of what he's saying.
It's real fuzzy to me. I don't know.
Finally,
the real Joy Taylor was on Undisputed. No, you were a phony on that show. This is the real you.
Phony's strong. But finally, some believe the Rockets missed their title opportunity last season. I would agree with that. They lost veterans Trevor Ariza and Luke Mbamute this summer. And James Harden has responded to all the doubters.
Oh.
He said, people said me and Chris can't play together, then we're the number one team in the NBA. Obviously, you can look at the roster and look at different players and say that, but you have to be on the court, and you've got to be in the trenches and be in the war. Eventually, we'll figure it out. Do you think the Rockets took a step back?
Yeah, defensively they did. But offensively they didn't. So they're going to win a bunch of games. It doesn't matter what happens in the regular season. We will figure out if they took a step back when they face the Warriors. And until then, they're going to win 55, 60 games because they have two great players and a really good coach, and Clint Capella's good, and Carmelo can score. So
they still have PJ Tucker.
Yeah, they're going to win a bunch of games. We'll determine if they've taken a step back in a 7-game series next June.
But that's my issue with the Rockets. Nobody's saying you're not going to be a great team. But nobody cares about the regular season great teams. The Toronto Raptors were a great regular season team. Remember how that turned out for them? Not so great.
Right.
Nobody cares about the regular season championships. Win when it matters.
Joy Taylor with the news.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Lie News.
Okay, we do it from time to time midweek. It's a Thursday today. I'm your stockbroker. You ask for advice. I tell you to buy it, sell it, or hold it. Buy, sell, or hold. Here we go.
Time to buy, sell, or hold.
I'd buy that for $1.
Colin will decide if he'll buy it, sell,
I want you to sell,
or hold.
Please hold. Buy, sell, or hold. Jason Garrett will be the head coach of the Cowboys on Thanksgiving.
A lot of talk about Jason Garrett is on the hot seat in Dallas. It should be noted he's had only one losing season there, and that was when he had chaos at quarterback and Tony Romo got hurt, and they didn't have effective backups. With all the controversy and stuff he dealt with last year, and with having the Super Bowl champions in his division, they still went 9-7. And I would say this, I do believe it's the best Cowboys roster in years. Now, I don't think it's as good as Philadelphia, and it may not be as good and as balanced as the New York Giants. But I will say this. They have young edge rushers, excellent young linebackers, excellent offensive line, star at running back, and Garrett's at least a B head coach. So, John, bye. Jason Garrett's going to coach the Cowboys all season long.
Sticking with the Cowboys, buy, sell, or hold, Dak Prescott will account for more touchdowns than Kirk Cousins.
Well, Kirk Cousins has something Dallas does not have. They have two really good deep threats. And when you have deep threats, it doesn't mean you'll have a higher passer rating, but it generally means you have more touchdowns. You get more easy touchdowns over the top. The other thing to remember is Dak Prescott accounted for 29 and 28 touchdowns in his first 2 years, all in. Kirk Cousins averaged 31 over the past 3 seasons. And Minnesota is a team that has a better tight end, better wide receivers, and I think with Kirk Cousins, they're going to throw the ball down the field. I think the Cowboys this year, without Witten and Dez and new possession guys, will be more of a run-oriented offense. So, John, sell. I think Kirk Cousins will throw for more touchdowns than Dak Prescott.
Buy, sell, or hold, Matt Ryan will have a better season than Aaron Rodgers, Carson Wentz, and Dak Prescott.
Well, first of all, he's got better receivers than Dak Prescott. Nobody disputes that. He's got a better offensive line and better receivers than Aaron Rodgers. The Falcons' offensive line is the most underrated in the league, probably top 3 or 4. And we don't know if Carson Wentz is going to be available in week 1 or 2. Matt Ryan, by the way, over the last 2 years, has the second highest passer rating to Tom Brady in the National Football League. And again, Aaron Rodgers and Wentz are coming off injuries. So, John, bye. Matt Ryan's going to have a very good year, and because of personnel around him and injuries for others, he will have a better year than Wentz, Dak, and Aaron Rodgers.
Buy, sell, or hold, the Patriots defense will take a major step back this season.
Okay, so they lose Malcolm Butler. Okay, that's understood. But the one area where I think they've absolutely improved is on the defensive front. And also remember, their best defender in the front 7, Dante Hightower, returns this year. My questions about New England are rebuilding their offensive line, their lack of dynamic playmakers on the outside, and a bunch of good, not great running backs. I also think this. If the Patriots defense faced on a regular basis elite veteran quarterbacks with their current personnel, I think you could argue they would take a step back. But the Jets may start a rookie, the Bills may start a rookie, and the AFC Kansas City going to start a young guy. Andrew Luck's coming back, we don't know. There is a lot of rebuilding and unknowns with quarterback play in the AFC. So, John, sell. The Patriots defense, I do not think will take a major step back.
Buy, sell, or hold, Baker Mayfield will be the Browns' starting quarterback by Halloween.
Now, Halloween, John, is October, 31st?
Yes.
Okay, so that's about 7 games in. Tyrod Taylor, in a cold weather city, Buffalo, led them to the playoffs. And he led them to the playoffs because he makes no mistakes. So Tyrod Taylor is not going to go to Cleveland and make a bunch of mistakes. Got a veteran head coach. He's a veteran quarterback. But 5 of the last 6 number 1 picks were quarterbacks before Halloween. When you're the number 1 pick in the draft and the money you are spending on that, never forget Cleveland's schedule. They open with Pittsburgh and New Orleans and face Oakland in week 4. They are going to be 1-3. And the owner, Jimmy Haslam, who has run through coaches in Cleveland and run through coaches at the University of Tennessee, where he's the number 1 booster, is going to demand Hugh Jackson off an 0-16 season start Baker Mayfield. So, John, bye. Baker's going to start by Halloween. I'm not sure if he'll be completely ready, but he's going to start by that point.
Last one, buy, sell, or hold, Bryce Harper will never play in a World Series.
Well, he is a free agent at the end of the season. And what's becoming popular in baseball is rent-a-player. Because the Dodgers and the Cubs are very good teams this year. I watched the Dodgers play last night. They got a lot of sticks. Jock Peterson's now hitting too. And in the baseball, you don't have to give up a ton to rent a star player for a couple of months. You don't have to buy him long term. so the Dodgers could rent him. The Cubs could rent him if they wanted to. Cubs did that with Aroldis Chapman. If he stays with the Nationals, I have questions about the dynamic in that locker room. Anybody that loves the Nats knows they've underachieved for several years. So, John,
please.
I'm going to hold on Bryce Harper. I want to see where he ends up. If the Yankees probably won't go after him, but if the Dodgers just rent Machado and let him go, they will, and they go long-term on Bryce Harper, I think there is a possibility Bryce Harper will be back close to his hometown in Vegas and Los Angeles and win a World Series. The story today of note, Ohio State. We will give you the very latest on Urban Meyer. What's the very latest? We'll give you an update coming up next. When you're ready for a new car, Hyundai's on your team. They have a shopper assurance program, flexible test driving, transparent pricing, streamlined purchasing, 3-day worry-free vehicle exchange. HyundaiUSA.com/shopper assurance. All right, just in, 3 days after naming him their, quote, head breakfast coach, Bob Evans Restaurants has suspended its endorsement deal with Ohio State football coach Urban Meyer, who's currently on paid leave. Quote, at Bob Evans, we strongly believe in the family-first values upon which the company was founded. Not the end of the world, but it is something. It is showing you that corporate America, which is uneasy with stories like this, is bailing on Urban Meyer. Now, again, that doesn't mean he's going to get fired, but it is something. It is a reaction to the controversy yesterday. Advertisers don't want anything to do with the unknown. They don't know what's going to happen. It's domestic violence. And so Bob Evans is like, we're out of here. My cynical view is right now Ohio State is doing two things, looking for an alibi or renegotiating a contract and looking for a new coach. One of the two things are happening. We'll find out. I'll have more at that at the top of the hour. Plus Greg Cosell here today. You will get smarter. The other story today is an NFL story. I learned something years ago. Joy, I don't know. I've had 12 contracts in my life. One of the things I've been taught is never back people into a corner. If you're negotiating a contract in any business, don't make demands and back people into a corner. You're going to pay me $1 million or I'm not showing up to work. You're backing them into a corner. It's the old fight or flight theory. When you back a line into a corner, he's going to eat you or run, right? A lot of these defensive players in the NFL are overplaying their hands. Aaron Donald, I want to be paid like a quarterback. You're overplaying your hand. You're a defensive lineman. We're not paying you $25 million a year. You're not making $25 million a year. Earl Thomas today in the Players Tribune. Earl Thomas came, sign me to a new contract. It's like, dude, you're overplaying your hand. You're a 29-year-old safety. Nobody's paying safeties what you want to get paid now. The world has changed. Khalil Mack won't reach out and talk to the Raiders. Okay, well, you're overplaying your hand. These defensive players in the NFL are not watching the culture of football where nobody can stop anybody, where Saxonville got shredded by the Steelers, where Saxonville got shredded by Tom Brady, where Saxonville got shredded by Jimmy Garoppolo, where Saxonville got beat by Marcus Mariota 2 times. That's the great defense in the league with the nickname Saxonville. Nobody can stop anybody. The Eagles and Patriots, top 5 scoring defenses in the Super Bowl, gave up 800 yards. They punted once. There was 1 sack. I mean, it was 60% third down conversion rates between the two offenses. So I'm seeing, this is just bad negotiating by players and their agents. Sports change. In baseball right now, it used to be about getting starting pitchers, maybe a closer, but relief guys were irrelevant. You had to have a closer, that was it. Bullpens now are more valuable than starting pitching. The culture's changed. I'm sorry if you're a starting pitcher, but the culture's changed. We used to have fullbacks in the NFL. We don't. Safeties used to matter. They don't. People don't draft safeties in the first round much anymore, unless you're really, really special. Tight ends didn't matter at all. Then we had Gronk, Antonio Gates. Now tight ends are more valuable. Sports used to be centers ran the NBA. You had to have a center. You couldn't win without a Wilt, a Jabbar, a Bob Lanier, a Bill Russell, a Tim Duncan, a Akeem Ashai. You couldn't win without a center. Analytics came into basketball. Nobody wants centers. And if you're a center, you got to be able to shoot a three. Boogie Cousins, we like you. Go shoot threes. Anthony Davis, we like you. Go shoot threes. The world changes. So centers now in the NBA can't overplay their hand. Dwight Howard, with you, without you. No big deal. Here's a minimum contract. In football, defensive players aren't getting the money of offensive players because the sport, all the rules in the NFL right now, all the rules in football, period, are offensive. I mean, Nick Saban couldn't stop Deshaun Watson in back-to-back championships. You can't stop anybody. So I see this all. I see it in my business. I see it in baseball. I mean, it's nothing against Bryce Harper. 10-year deal, $400 million. If he can get it, brother, I love you. But you think I'm going to pay $400 million for a guy hitting 230? Because I get 45 jacks and 100 RBI? I'm not paying that. And I love Bryce Harper, but I'm not paying that. Maybe half that because he can put butts in seats. I mean, if Bryce Harper couldn't put butts in seats, I wouldn't pay him anything. But the fact that he can put butts in seats, that may be in a city like New York that charges $150 a ticket. You can make the numbers work in a New York or a Los Angeles. You know, I don't think Wrigley Field's big enough to make that work. But, and I love Bryce Harper, but I'm just seeing this. I see it all the time. Aaron Donald of the Rams, you just came out and said $25 million or I'm not talking to you. Well, I'm not paying you $25 million. I'm not. So when you go into negotiations, I'm not an agent. I'm not a litigator. But when you go into negotiations, don't draw lines in the sand. Talk. Communicate. Keep an open flow of conversation. I get this or I'm not showing up. Doesn't work. Earl Thomas, dude, going to the Players Tribune. Big mistake. I don't know who told you that was a great idea. You're overplaying your hand. Aaron Donald, $25 million. Who told you to do that? You can't pay a defensive lineman $25 million. J.J. Watt was unblockable. Great game, they'd lose. Bad game, they'd win. That's just the position. And I'll tell you this. Here's what's really happening in sports now. And, Joy, you and I have talked about this. Analytics are truth serum. You and I can go have a beer at the bar and argue about sports all night. But analytics show you data. This works. This doesn't. It's taken the dumb guy 3 beer in argument and thrown it away. It's taken away the guy that says, man, I'm a football coach. I got a gut feeling this is going to work. There's no more gut feelings. You know analytically, this doesn't work, so we're not going to do this. And you can either embrace that stuff or not. But in basketball, it's taken out the guy at the bar that argues. It's taken out I got a gut feeling this is the way this ball game's going to work. It doesn't work that way. Analytics have taken dumb guys out of sports. Hunch guys, gut feeling guy is out of sports.
Gut feeling was very reliable statistic for a long time.
It was. No, I mean, Joy, we grew up. I used to hear guys say this. I drafted that guy because he was a winner. And you're like, well, he played at Florida. Florida always wins football games. Every Alabama quarterback's a winner. What does that mean? USC quarterback, never been a USC quarterback in the Super Bowl. They're all winners in college. Cody Kessler was a winner. Matt Leinart was a winner. Everybody wins at USC. Every quarterback at USC over the course of 4 years starting wins a bunch of games. All right. Also, by the way, Gronk came out yesterday in the NFL. Some good news. Gronk says Tom Brady's a new guy. Tom Brady has changed. Here is Gronk talking in a very humorous way about Tom Brady, 41-year-old Tom at practice yesterday.
Back in the day, he was a little bit more on you. You didn't get it right, a little bit more in your face. But, I mean, I don't see, he's 40, going on 41 now. I don't feel like he backed off on that a little bit, which is nice. He used to be mean to me. Glad he's not to these young guys.
Yeah, Tom Brady has changed. You know, when you get the titles and the rings and the legacy, I think you chill out a little bit, to be honest with you.
He might have taken a little bit of his edge off.
Yeah, I think. I remember hearing this years ago about Tom Brokaw. His family was talking about him, and they said Tom Brokaw, you know, when he was in his 30s and 40s as the newsman at NBC, was really intense. And then about his 50s, he lightened up, and it's like, once you get the stack of money, once you get the legacy, once you get the Academy, the Grammys, the awards, you just you just loosen up. We live in that tunnel. We got to get this. We got to do this. Pressure from our dads. Pressure from our peers. We got to make money. Once you have it all, you take a deep breath. Greg Cosell next.
Be sure to catch live editions of The Herd weekdays at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific.
This is The Herd, hour number 3, live in Los Angeles, iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio, and FS1. Joy Taylor is joining me in hour number 3 live. By the way, on the couch, one of my favorite guests. The NFL season starts tonight. Very fired up for that. Not going to be the greatest game of the year. Baltimore-Chicago, Mitch Trubisky.
An important game.
But it's an important game because of Lamar Jackson. Greg Cosell in 15 minutes will have tape on why he's higher on Lamar Jackson than I am. I am cautiously optimistic. He'll also have a piece of tape on Dak Prescott. So we got some film on why he likes or doesn't like Dak Prescott. So Greg's coming fully loaded with opinions. He always makes everybody smarter. That's coming up in 15 minutes. And that piece of tape, he says, will define the season. Okay, the Urban Meyer story broke just before our show yesterday. Today, we've had more developments. And I am incredibly, greatly disappointed, not only in Ohio State football, but when I think of Ohio State football and Urban Meyer, I think of Louisville basketball and Rick Pitino, and Baylor football and Art Briles, and Penn State football at the end with Joe Pa. Those universities and those fan bases and those coaches want me to believe the unbelievable. That husbands and wives don't talk. That coaches who live together in small spaces for 70 hours a week vacation together don't talk. We now have texts which show that Urban Meyer's wife, also an Ohio State athletic department employee, knew of a coach on her husband's staff beating his wife. We know that to be true, and she never told him for 3 years. I sit with my wife, and I'm sure you do this every night. When the kids go to bed last night, we talk for 90 minutes. We talk about our kids. We talk about our lives. We talk about our future. We talk about our house. We talk about vacation plans. We talk about schools. Urban Meyer's wife, 3 years ago, knew about this, validated, verified on texts, and for 3 years never told her husband. Man, that must be a really bad marriage. Oh, wait, it's not. Because at Big Ten Media Day, Urban Meyer bragged about the relationship with his wife. Here it is.
She's always weighed in, and that's my best friend and soulmate, and she's been right there with everything, especially when you start dealing with, not necessarily who's going to carry the ball on third down. She has opinions too, but we don't chat about that. We chat about people.
People.
She's got a great spirit and a great love of people, and her heart's always in the right place. She's phenomenal.
Okay.
And so absolutely, I rely on her.
We talk about people. Well, is Courtney Smith a person? Because she was getting beaten by her husband, who was a football coach under Urban Meyer. Not to be hyperbolic here, but when you brag about your relationship and then you want me the next day to believe we didn't talk about it. Really? College football coaches and basketball coaches are men often in small towns with power, where pro fans are loyal to a point, college fans are loyal to a fault. Ohio State fans this morning will surround their coach because that's what they do in college towns. College football coaches have become Jack Nicholson. Remember his character in A Few Good Men? You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. It's a code. Us against them. The big bad media out to get us. Civilians, average people don't get us. Why don't football coaches and basketball coaches like Rick Pitino and Urban Meyer and Art Briles and the people at Penn State years ago stop being Jack Nicholson? Start nurturing, not protecting. Start communicating, not protecting. And fans, it's on you. You are asking me to believe the unbelievable. That for 3 years, the wife didn't talk to the coach. We have verification that multiple wives on the staff knew, and none of them talked to their husbands. And if they did, then the husbands who are coaches didn't talk to the boss down the hall, who they talked to 15 times a day, never brought it up once. I don't know if you fire Urban Meyer. Maybe you should fire all of Ohio State's football coaches for not coming up with better material. Come up with a better excuse. Here's Courtney Smith, who's been pleading for help for years.
You know, she said she wanted, she was going to have to tell Urban. She was going to have to tell Urban. I said, that's fine. You know, you should tell Urban. We can't have somebody like this coaching young men.
No, you can't. And you shouldn't. But increasingly, we see it over and over. Unfortunately, we have a victim here, and the town will put their arms around the coach yet again and ask me to believe the unbelievable. Let me shift to something with football that is a lighter note. Jared Cook's a good football player. He says that Jon Gruden, the new coach of the Raiders, is showing the Raiders old grainy film from 1976. I laughed at this because I don't know how this Raiders-Gruden thing's going to work. Baseball is considered old, stuck in its ways, rigid, and stodgy. But even 10 years ago in baseball, we didn't talk about launch angles and exit velocity. We didn't have defensive shifts. Starters were paid a lot more than bullpen guys. But baseball, stuck in its ways, right, has made massive changes. What about football? The NFL is like Silicon Valley. They change week to week, day to day. Football doesn't even look the same on television that it did 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you had something called huddles and fullbacks, and the overtime rules were different, and the PAT rules were different, and you didn't have 4 and 5 receivers all the time. But that part, I think Jon Gruden can figure out. What worries me about Jon Gruden is the other stuff, not the schematics, not the rule changes. The world has changed in 10 years. 10 years ago, a coach, an old white male coach, could walk into a locker room that's diverse and say, no politics, and it was understood. If the old ball coach walks into an NFL locker room and says that today, he's racially insensitive. Or worse, there was no Twitter. There was no Instagram. There was no Snapchat. The players weren't as empowered. But players today, and rightfully so, have an opinion. Because we go to these games for the players, not the GM, scouts, and coaches. So I worry when I read this story, and I got to be honest, I laughed at the headline. Jared Cook says Jon Gruden is showing the Raiders, quote, old grainy film from like 1976. I just don't think this thing's going to work long term. It may work for a year. Derek Carr is an unbelievable quarterback. But I got to give my staff credit. They found something. I just can't figure out why Jon Gruden is not communicating and can't get a hold of Khalil Mack. But we found out why their communication is so bad. Gruden is using America Online. And he's trying to get a hold of Khalil Mack using this device. And Joy, it's just not working.
Someone keeps picking up the phone in his house. That's what it is. And then he has to keep starting over.
So he's trying to get a hold of Khalil Mack. And the connecting, it's not working. Yeah, it's just not working.
Maybe that's Khalil emailing him back.
In 2008, when Gruden left, here was a headline. On internet television, that's how it was termed, both NFL.com and NBCSports.com carried complete live games for the first time ever on that thing called the internet. That's the game he left. And football is fluid, man. There's jobs that don't change in 10 years. They're called the post office. NFL, jettison the thing for a decade. I don't care if you're talking about it on football. That locker room is a completely different place. Coming up next, NFL football. Lamar Jackson and the Bears collide tonight. Greg Cosell on the couch. A couple of great pieces of video to get you revved up and make you smarter. Can't wait for this. I'm all for good sportsmanship. That's why we're huge fans of Hyundai's new Shopper Assurance program. Transparent pricing, flexible test driving, streamlined purchasing. HyundaiUSA.com/shopper assurance. Learn more for yourself. Greg Cosell, 30 years, NFL Films, is somebody that about 7-8 years ago I started using at the other place. And I got such tremendous feedback that people said, can you do hours with him? I get so much smarter talking and watching football. And it's an absolute pleasure. I think this is the second time I've had you in studio. I hope we put you in a nice hotel with comfortable seating on a plane, and we're feeding you well. Let's start with this. Yesterday, Eric Mangini said, like when you're a receiver and you go to New England, it's like a finishing school.
Right.
So Brandon Cooks, their deep threat, gone. Julian Edelman, out. Danny Amendola, gone. I mean, you look at Tom Brady, Gronk plays about 10.5 to 11 games a year now because of his injuries. What do you make of this offense, which could also be argued is rebuilding its offensive line?
Yeah, I think they're a little different, Colin, than most teams in the league. I heard you talk earlier today about fullbacks in the NFL, and there's really a dearth of them. Teams don't use them. The Patriots do. They have James Devlin, not a name that a lot of people would know, but he plays 25 to 30% of their snaps. Think about that for a minute. That's a lot of snaps. No team in the NFL is more multiple and diverse with their formations with a fullback on the field. So what they do is they create matchups. And there's no quarterback who's better than Tom Brady at dissecting and investigating and researching the defense before the ball is snapped.
That's key.
That's the critical piece here. So the combination of the personnel packages they use, the formation variation, and Brady's ability to win before the ball is snapped makes their offense work. Now, it's still a little speculative right now with who they're going to line up at wide receiver. Obviously, they just signed Eric Decker, and he's an interesting player because he's a veteran who understands route concepts, understands coverages. So we'll see how it all plays out. But that's what they count on to be successful in the pass game.
For Des Bryant, it's a fascinating year. His go-to tight end, veteran, great hand wide receiver, Jason Witten, gone.
Right.
His talented but at times demanding wide receiver, Des Bryant, gone. Ezekiel Elliott comes back, who could be a back blocker or receiver. You've got a piece of tape that you think is interesting, and take our audience through this with Dak, who I like.
Right.
Not the strongest arm, not the best athlete. There's a leadership component here I like. Take us through the tape.
Well, before we get to that, let's start with what the Cowboys they're telling you what they want to be on offense. Okay, they did this in 2014 with Tony Romo when DeMarco Murray had 390 carries. They did it in Zeke's first year in 2016. By drafting Williams, the offensive lineman out of Texas this year with their first pick, they're telling you they want their offense to start with the run game. Okay, that's what they want. So what that means is third down becomes critically important. And if you look at statistics right here, third down and 6+, very important for Dak Prescott. He was very good in 2016, not as good in 2017. That's a critical down now for the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott. So what they need to do with him in these kinds of situations is define the throws. This is where the tape comes in. And this goes back to last year. As I said, he wasn't as good last year, but they need concepts to define the throws for Dak Prescott. And obviously this is Terrence Williams, but here's what they did. They lined up with 3 wide receivers, trips to one side of the field. They knew they were going to get man. They're playing a division opponent, the Giants, so they knew what they were going to get. So what they do here is a natural rub or pick concept. The corner was off on Terrence Williams. They run 2 verticals with the inside receivers, and then they run Williams underneath on the drag. So the concept defines the throw for Dak Prescott. These are the kinds of things you need to do with him. And then the other thing that they rely on, and you can debate this, you've probably talked a lot about this, are those second reaction off-schedule, outside of structure plays. How much can you rely on them on third down to win and get you first downs. But clearly, Dak Prescott is capable of those kinds of things.
A lot of people love the acquisition by Green Bay to bring in kind of a finesse tight end, a ball catcher, Jimmy Graham, who's had some drops last couple of years, with Aaron Rodgers. How do you think that works?
Well, do you remember, it must be 4, 5, 6 years ago now when they had Jermichael Finley?
Yes.
Jermichael Finley, a great, great athlete at tight end. What they did a lot was they split him out as the single receiver, usually to the short side of the field, and they would create matchups. I think you'll see more of that now with Jimmy Graham. That was very successful. One thing we know about Aaron Rodgers, there may not be a better back shoulder thrower in the National Football League. And you line up a 6'6", 6'7" Jimmy Graham split out as the single receiver, even if you put a reasonably athletic safety on him, the safety's not going to be 6'5" or 6'6". So you're going to get into those matchups with Jimmy Graham on the perimeter and the best back shoulder thrower in the NFL and Aaron Rodgers. And I think that's the way they'll use Jimmy Graham.
In that division, the Bears, they play tonight. Matt Nagy's the new coach. He was Andy Reid's guy in Kansas City. Andy Reid gave the Eagles Doug Peterson. He won a Super Bowl. Now, his next smart guy is Matt Nagy. Andy develops these coaches, part of his tree. He goes to Chicago. I'm a real doubter on Mitch Trubisky. I don't see it. I think his ceiling's very low. I've said I think he's a lesser version of Garoppolo.
Well, they've compared him. Nagy has compared him to Alex Smith, who, of course, he coached. And I'm not sure that that's a great comparison in terms of what Alex Smith is. But I think you have to look at the Bears coaching staff. And I'm a big believer in coaching, as I know you are.
Yes.
So you have Matt Nagy, who comes from the Andy Reid school. Very well-designed, well-schemed passing game. But who did they bring in as the offensive coordinator? Mark Helfrich from the Chip Kelly school. So you have arguably the most interesting mix of offensive philosophies in the NFL. Matt Nagy from the Andy Reid school and Mark Helfrich from the Chip Kelly school. How is that going to play out? You're going to see a ton of shotgun. You're going to see a ton of misdirection, deception, influence concepts. This helps a quarterback become far more efficient because things get defined. Because the defense, particularly the linebacker level, they don't know what they're looking at. There's a lot of movement behind the line of scrimmage on offense, and that's where I think it really helps a quarterback, and I think Trubisky will really be helped by this and will end up being a pretty high percentage thrower.
Speaking of Alex Smith, did the Redskins upgrade from Kirk Cousins to Alex Smith?
I think from a tape perspective, I would say no. I think in their mind, from a leadership perspective, they would say yes. But I think that Kirk Cousins on tape is a better quarterback than Alex Smith.
Wow, okay. He's a bigger, stronger athlete.
Yeah, neither one has a big arm. I think that one of the things that's always been troublesome for me watching Alex Smith on tape, and there's no statistic for this, there's no statistic for balls that a quarterback doesn't throw that should be thrown.
Oh, that's interesting, right?
And to me, that's where the analytics and sabermetrics, whatever term you want to use, can't factor that in. There's no statistic for that. And when you watch as much tape as I do, and I see throws that should be made, for instance, there were 3 or 4 of them in the second half of the playoff game that Kansas City lost last year to Tennessee. Alex Smith should have turned the ball loose to receivers that were open within the design of the route concept. He didn't turn them loose, and he was responsible for his own sacks. So Alex Smith has always had that issue to some degree.
By the way, there's also a stat that husbands don't get credit for, Joy. Arguments we avoid because the husband just takes one for the team.
Oh, I'm good at that.
So am I. There's no stat for it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, honey, you're right. Greg and I are like...
Don't you just measure that in just like happiness and peace? Isn't that the statistic?
So you guys get credit for that one too.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay, Lamar Jackson plays tonight.
Yeah.
And, preseason, it's a lot of vanilla defenses. By the time he goes in the game, he could be playing against guys who are working at Ralph's Supermarket.
He'll be playing against you and I.
Right.
Exactly.
So what do you see on tape, piece of tape on Lamar Jackson? What do you see you like or don't like?
First of all, I heard you talking about Bobby Petrino. And Bobby Petrino runs a fairly sophisticated pass game. So these people who automatically say that, well, he ran a simplistic offense, that's not true. Now, there's always a jump to the NFL no matter what offense you run, but he did not run a simplistic offense. Now, the key thing about Lamar is I thought he was a little better from the pocket than people are giving him credit for. And I want to show you this one play, which really, to me, speaks a lot about Lamar Jackson. We know he can run, okay? That's a given. We know that he's got great legs. This is a play where he stepped up, avoiding the blitz, and made, by the way, a big-time throw. Now, what I really liked about this, he turns his back to the defense. So now he's got a free rusher coming on his front side, which he doesn't know yet. So now when he turns around, there is a free rusher right in his face, Colin. This is tough to deal with. You know what I like here? He doesn't just break down and run. What does he do? He steps up. Look at him reset. Good footwork, good mechanics, good fundamentals, and this is not a routine, easy throw. Now, you can go back to the Bill Walsh school. Bill Walsh always believed that if he saw a player do things on tape, even if he didn't see it a lot, that he could then coach it because it's there. So Lamar Jackson needs to be coached, no question. But I think the people who are dismissing his pocket play are making a mistake.
Yeah. By the way, Baker Mayfield, Cleveland. He's an accurate thrower.
He's a compact delivery, quick twitch kid, very accurate thrower.
I don't
smart.
see a bust. I don't like the intangibles. But
yeah,
I
and
do
that's
like,
hard for us to know. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, it's hard for me to know that and talk about because I'm not with him every day. He's done some things, obviously, that might get people upset, but you'd have to be with him every day. But I thought the tape was really positive. And a very quick point on Baker Mayfield. I made it a point last year at Oklahoma to go through all his third down completions, and there were a lot of them, 130, give or take. What really stood out to me was the large number that came within structure. There were only 7 or 8 in which he actually ran around and moved. He actually played the position from the pocket within the structure of the offense.
That's good news. Now, you are back tomorrow. You're going to have a breakdown on tape of Deshaun Watson. What's interesting is the Texans and the Patriots meet in week 1. So Greg Cosell will join us tomorrow, and we'll do the same sort of thing. We'll have different videos. We all get smarter. Great seeing you, Greg. Here is Joy Taylor with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
See, Greg's defending Baker there.
No, I told you. He throws the ball too precisely to be a bust. If he has moderate to good protection, Baker will complete 63 or something % of his throws. And if you do that in this league, it is now more than ever a precision league. I don't like he's a little small, a little runaround, a little cocky, but that part, I just think his ceiling's closer to Case Keenum than Drew Brees, which people are saying. And I think it's completely ridiculous to compare anybody to Drew Brees, who's a top 15 quarterback ever.
Baker Jarvis, week 1. That's my prediction.
All right.
So, did you know that it's currently NBA Handles Week, Colin?
NBA
Handles.
Like your handle.
Handles.
Okay, yeah.
Handles, yes.
Right.
So to celebrate, Steph Curry recently sat down with Steve Smith, and he was asked who is his Mount Rushmore of all-time ball handlers. Here's his answer.
Let's see, who did I put in there? We got to put myself on there? Put myself, Kyrie.
You, Kyrie, that's two more left.
Pistol Pete, and Magic Johnson. He was up there. It wasn't anything like about to break your ankles type, but he knows I can get from point A to point B, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's ball handling is about being efficient, so I had to put him in.
It's a strong list. I like it. I have my own Mount Rushmore, though.
I love that he put Pete Maravich in. I love that. Because most people don't know about Pete Maravich. Mark Kriegel wrote a book called Pete. Have you guys ever read that book? Pete Maravich is one of the most fascinating basketball players in the history of basketball, his childhood. I love that Steph Curry named Pete Maravich.
Would you put Pistol Pete on your Mount Rushmore?
Absolutely. Pete Maravich, there's very little footage of Pete Maravich. Unless you live in Louisiana and have LSU stock footage. Pete Maravich is one of the most fascinating players. His story, his game, he was resented early. He was so different. His father God, he's just one of these guys. You know, we always talk about old baseball. We never talk about the old NBA because the NBA tends to be more of a look-forward league than a look-back league.
Right.
Pete Maravich is one of the few guys. Go find his tape. Go YouTube it. Go buy books about him. Really, he would absolutely work in today's NBA. He could shoot threes when nobody shot threes.
I would have Kyrie Irving, Allen Iverson, Jason Williams, and Isaiah Thomas on my ball.
Jason Williams.
Yes.
White chocolate?
Yes. I mean.
You know what? I actually like your list. Now, Isaiah was unbelievable.
I don't have Magic on.
You don't have.
Only because, to me, Magic was, when I think of Magic, it's not that he wasn't an all-time great ball handler, but I think of him more as a passer and facilitator.
I agree.
And I don't have Steph on this list because I think of him more number one
That's
as
fair.
a shooter.
I'll
he
tell you.
transformed the league with his three-point shooting ability.
I could make an argument Isaiah Thomas is number one.
Yeah, these aren't in any particular order.
Isaiah Thomas was like Harlem Globetrotter-like. Like if you would have put him, you could have just sent a tour around America of Isaiah Thomas showing ball handling skills, and he's the best probably I've ever seen.
And I to me, Kyrie is just, his ability to finish at the rim is just like nothing I've ever seen before.
Yeah.
So that's my list. Moving on, Russell Westbrook is very good at basketball. You give him a very hard time, but he's struggled with his three-point shooting, which is 31% career average from deep. And according to ESPN's Royce Young, he's looking to work on refining that this summer.
Oh.
He's been working on it this summer, I've been told. It's been a big-time off-season focus. What they've stressed, Zach, is a work on a catch-and-shoot, become a little bit better of a catch-and-shoot guy. But obviously, in order to do that, there needs to be a catching before the shooting. And it's hard to catch. It's hard to catch it from yourself.
That is, I think it's easier said than done. Most guys that come into this league as athletic but not great shooters, Derrick Rose, John Wall, Westbrook, I don't know. It's hard to explain. Like, sometimes they haven't worked on it. They've got their rhythm's not great. Their shooting style. Very rarely does a guy come into this league for 5 years and you're like, he's not a natural shooter, and then he becomes a great shooter. Like Steph Curry came in, Steve Nash came in, great shooters, and they remain great shooters. Now, people go, Jason Kidd, he never became a great shooter, but he took so many damn threes after a while, he had hit more than anybody else.
Well, Russell's highest shooting percentage from three is 34%. That was his MVP year. But Russell's incredibly athletic, and it is a good move to work on your three-point shooting as you're moving into later in your career.
Oh, God, yes.
So this is smart that he's getting on top of this now and working on improving that. Finally, Blake Bortles believes that he's putting forth more consistent play than he has in the past. He's not completely mistake-free, because who is? But he says the mistakes happen less frequently and are less costly than they have in previous seasons.
I think the positive is that the lows aren't near as low as they were. They're still up and down, which is going to be, especially when you play our defense every day. But I think, the ceilings or the floor has risen, I guess, in a weird way of saying that the lows aren't as bad. It's 1, 2, 3 bad plays compared to, there were times last year I'd go a whole day having a bad practice and, not really feel good about it. So I think as long as you continue to kind of make those lows not quite as bad as they, have been in the past, I think we'll have a chance.
I've never been a huge believer in the Jags, and I'm not putting a lot of faith in them this year either. But I do like that Blake is saying that. It's one thing that we've talked about a lot with Cam Newton, that it's so inconsistent with the play. One week it's great, 1 week you have no idea who this person is. So it's good that he's balancing it a bit more as when it comes to the mistakes with Blake Bortles. But I'm not in on the Jags this year. Yeah. I don't think you are either.
No, I'm Deshaun Watson's going to beat him twice, and Andrew Luck's going to beat him once. Joy Taylor with the news.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Lie News.
I'll have some final thoughts on my greatest disappointment with Urban Meyer and the Ohio State situation. And also coming up, best for last. If you thought time travel was impossible, one NFL star might just prove you wrong. That is next in Best for Last. When you're ready for a new car, consider Hyundai's On Your Team. Their Shopper Assurance program features transparent pricing, flexible test driving, and 3-day worry-free vehicle insurance. Be part of the team at Hyundai. Go to HyundaiUSA.com/Shopper Assurance. Best for last, thoughts on the Buckeyes and Urban Meyer. In Los Angeles, we return The Herd.
Want more Herd? The Herd streams 24 hours a day, 7 days a week within the iHeartRadio app. Search Herd to listen live or on demand whenever you like.
Great to have you in. The decision by Oakland to hire Jon Gruden was already a little bit of a throwback move since he coached that team back in like 98 through 2001. But Gruden has really been taking this one step further. So we begin our final segment with Best for Last.
After almost 3 hours, Colin apparently hasn't gotten to the point yet. Quit holding out on us, cowherd. It's the best for last.
So it was already a throwback, but at February, at the Combine, Jon Gruden came out and said this.
Look, we're not running a 1964 operation here, but there are some things that happened in 1964 that were pretty damn good. And if you don't think so, go ahead and have a nice day.
Okay, so he referenced 1964. Since then, players have said he's using grainy film that looks like it's from 1976. Yesterday, he was talking to players about the way the game is played, and he said this.
Look, we're not running a 1964 operation here, but there are some things that happened in 1964 that were pretty damn good. And if you don't think so, go ahead and have a nice day.
I think I played that twice. But we thought to ourselves, some things in sports, you can argue, used to be better than current things in sports. So we thought we would play Herd Tub Time Machine. Here we go.
With this machine, I can go back as far as I like.
The Herd Tub Time Machine.
Okay, you give me the year and what we did, and Joy and I will say if we like it or don't like it. Would we like it back, or we're glad it's gone?
Okay, let's go back to 1998. In baseball that year, Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa broke Roger Maris's home run record by a mile. McGwire hit 70, Sammy Sosa hit 66. Do you want to bring back the bulked up sluggers crushing home runs?
Well, I don't think people should take steroids or HGH because physically it's not healthy. But I will say this, they were cartoonish, they looked like superheroes, and I thought that home run race was not only historic but fascinating. I am for big Reggie Jackson, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa home run hitters in baseball. I wish it wasn't all we had like now with launch angles, but I liked it.
I loved it. It was my favorite year of baseball ever. I love when baseball has big personalities and big storylines, and it was the best. And the steroids is a side note for me.
All right, next year, John.
Let's go back to 1976. There was no such thing as a three-point line in basketball. So if you wanted to play basketball, you didn't really need to know how to shoot. Do you want to bring back an NBA with no three-point line?
No, because the one thing I do like about three-point shots is that if you're down by 11 with 2 minutes left, you're very much in the game. Now, what I don't like about the three-point shots, it can be repetitive to watch, right? Centers don't matter. If you can't shoot, you're not in the floor. And you get more blowouts in basketball because teams are so reliant. The hot team can take a lead on the bad, cold team by 24 in the first quarter. But I do believe it makes late-game deficits far more compelling, so I like the three-point line.
I was not alive in 1976, so I only know one version of basketball, and it's fun, and I like it, so I'd like to keep it.
All right.
Let's go over to 1990.
Herd Tub Time Machine.
That year in college football, national championship was split between Colorado and Georgia Tech. That's because there was no college football playoff or BCS. The college football national champion was decided by the AP poll and coaches. Do you want to bring back writers and coaches deciding who the champion is?
No. By the way, nobody will ever say this because we like to complain about everything. But since we've had the BCS, we've gotten it right. We've gotten it right. Every single matchup and every single team included, they've nailed it. So nothing against sports writers or coaches, but coaches have major agendas. And frankly, coaches don't even watch the games because they're coaching their games.
Right.
So they give their ballot to the sports information director. I like the way it's done now.
I do. I would like to expand it a little more.
So would I.
I would like to do an 8-team playoff.
I agree.
I think that would be more
want
fair.
Yes.
It would have included a team like UCF that had an undefeated
Right.
season. Like it would be more fair that way. But I do like the way we do it now.
All Power Fives get a team in, then 3 at-larges, one of them being a non-traditional power like a UCF. It lets the little guy in who will probably get pounded, but it'd be fun anyway.
Right.
All right, let's go back to 1964. That year, UCLA basketball won its first ever NCAA tournament, and they had a pretty easy road. That's because the tournament didn't have 68 teams. It had 25. Do you want to bring back a 25-team NCAA tournament?
Yeah, because I think what's happened to college basketball, it's all about the bracket. I mean, seriously, nobody talks about the regular season. I know Gonzaga, Duke, North Carolina, Michigan State, Kansas are all getting in. So I think sports now, in a very fragmented world, we've got 1 million channels, 1 million blogs, 1 million websites, everything's on our phone, we're distracted. The way to get people interested in things is urgency. Baseball's got too many games. College basketball lets too many people into the tournament. If you made regular seasons and those conference tournaments matter, my eyeballs would go, oh my God, Duke loses tonight? Duke's out of the tournament. I can tell you 8 teams that are in next year, 8 to 16 I can tell you who's in the tournament, and I can tell you they're all going to be 1, 2, or 3 or 4 seeds.
I got to disagree. Great shots of Coach Wooden, by the way. I got to disagree. I think the bracket is fun. It brings in fringe fans that don't pay any attention to college basketball whatsoever, and they make an incredible amount of money for it. Not that any of it goes to the players, but I do like it. And you have great upsets, too, with the way that the tournament is structured now. So.
All right. Herd Tub Time Machine, John?
Let's go to 2002. Someone had the bright idea to combine the excitement of basketball with trampolines. It was a sport called slam ball.
I remember that.
It was big for a while until it went defunct in the late 2000s.
Yeah.
Do you want to go back to slam ball, Colin?
No, I thought it was ridiculous, but it was one of those things. The video is absurd. I don't know who invented it or who killed it, but I will say this. It created an entire industry of these warehouses full of those trampolines that my son goes to. It's created an industry. This is one of those ideas that was not built to last forever, but for the year or two that it was available, it was outrageously funny.
Oh my God, that clothesline was incredible.
How do any of these guys
like
have
WWE basketball?
How do any of these guys have knees
Right.
intact?
I mean, look at that, just straight tackling them. I disagree. We got to bring this back.
right.
Now that we have social media, this would be incredible.
And Herd Tub Time Machine continues.
All right, let's go back to 1985. That year, a man named David Cook had a bright idea to rent videotapes. This led to the creation of the first Blockbuster video. Do you want to do away with Netflix and go back to renting VHS tapes at a store? I bet Jon Gruden does.
No, God, that was awful. You'd go to the video store, and I remember going to a video store. It was so inappropriate that had an adult section in the back of it.
Right.
And unfortunately, they had all their good thrillers next to the adult video portion of the store. So I was a local TV guy, and I would go back to get like The Exorcist or, some scary, The Shining.
Sure.
And everybody thought, oh, that TV guy's going back to get porn. And they did, in the back of the store, they had this adult video stuff, and I was always like, oh, Lord.
Going to Blockbuster used to be kind of an event. Like, it was a fun thing to do.
It was?
Like, let's go to Blockbuster and pick out a movie. And then they had the overpriced snacks there, which you never got. But I do not miss Blockbuster at all because the convenience of staying home and picking a movie with the remote is just better.
I like binge watching, and I think the consumer does because we can watch everything on our terms.
Yeah, I just binged Handmaid's Tale. It's a good watch. You should try it.
Yeah. All right, there we go. The Herd Tub Time Machine. So the words of Urban Meyer could come back to haunt him. There are several texts that indicate that it's hard to believe that Urban Meyer would not know about a football coach on his staff repeatedly assaulting his wife. He is no longer now a member of his staff. Right now, Urban Meyer is on administrative leave. Now, you can be cynical and think they're negotiating a way out, or you can believe the university is trying to find a way to keep maybe the first or second best coach in college football. Now, Urban Meyer's contract has a clause in it, and it says as an Ohio State employee who supervises others, Meyer is required by the university's sexual misconduct policy to report knowledge of domestic abuse by a university employee. According to the policy, an individual need not be charged with or convicted of a criminal offense to be found responsible for domestic violence pursuant to this policy. What Urban Meyer needs is verification that he did at some point in 2015, if it appears there is proof that Urban Meyer, what I've read from the text, there is proof in 2015 that Urban Meyer was informed of the allegations against this football coach. He has to find a piece of paper, a text, some viable form of communication that he informed his boss. According to Title IX, the Clery Act, because from all the things I'm reading, it does appear that Urban Meyer was informed of it via a text at some point. He was notified of it. The question now, can he show that he informed others of it?
Well, I mean, his wife was clearly aware of it. So is she not held liable for not reporting if she did not?
Right. She is in like the nursing program. She is an Ohio State employee as well. She clearly is shown knowledge of it, texting the wife of the football coach.
There's no denying that she had knowledge of it.
Yeah, so if she had knowledge of it, obviously he and her talked. He has bragged about their relationship. He's talked about how close they are and how much they talk. So to me, it seems like, can he show proof that he indeed told his boss? By the way, Urban Meyer can lie to me all day. That doesn't mean he's going to get fired. You know, presidents, senators, governors, coaches lie to the media all day. That doesn't get you fired. You can't lie to the NCAA. Jim Tressel did and got booted. And you better not lie to your boss. So it seems to me, without a shadow of a doubt, Urban Meyer knew something about it. Now it comes down to communication. Did he at any point inform his boss, Gene Smith, who is the athletic director? I understand smaller towns and college towns being more parochial. Most people in smaller towns grew up in smaller towns. Cities have more people, more transplants, not from the area. They tend to be a little less parochial. Let's all remember, though, before you go to your message board and Twitter to defend your ball coach, there is a victim here who called police 9 times and was handled and beaten savagely.